computer. And then we're going to start webinar. All right, we see people joining here. We're just going to wait a few seconds. All right, looks like everyone's here. Thank you all for joining us for this webinar this evening. My name is Kyle. I'm the Vice President of the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association. So glad you could take part in this event, and we plan to have more of these. So please watch your schedules, watch your email. We'll have more. But before we get started, I do want to mention that just today we announced the agenda for the student forum at Lambeau Field, which will be February 22nd. If you were there last year, you know that this was a fantastic event. Kyle Wallace was our MC, and it was just fantastic. We plan on having another great agenda for you, so make sure you go to the WBA website, check that out. There's early bird registration that's available right now, so you can save a few bucks and register today. And we'll see you at Lambeau. And also, before we get started, I also wanted to mention that again, this is going to be a series of webinars that our Young Professionals Committee is going to be putting on. And the next one's going to be January 29th. And it's going to be called Getting Your First Job in TV. So you'll want to mark your calendars for that. And that is just like this is free for you to take part in. And one more thing before we get started, Michelle Betterkind, our president and CEO, is here as a guest this evening. So thank you for being here, Michelle. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kyle Wallace, who's going to be your moderator this evening, and we'll have him get the conversation started.
Thank you so much, Kyle. Good evening, everybody. Appreciate you all joining us here today for this great sports debate. I'll be very honest, a lot of us love debate and talk sports. So if we go left or go right or have inside jokes, just smile and laugh. We can't see you, but smiling and laughing. I'll feel it through the video. So again, my name is Kyle Wallace. I currently am the director of content at 1017 The Truth, a Black Talk radio station in Milwaukee. In addition to that, I am co-host on Kyle Brust and Nortman on ESPN Wisconsin. That's 94.5 ESPN in Milwaukee, 100.5 ESPN Madison, and 1430 ESPN Beaver Dam. From 2 to 5, where I have afternoon drive, and I co-host with some great people. Bradley Nortman, you can see him in there. He'll talk about his story. You can already tell he's somebody that's important based off the helmets behind. Those are not toys. Those are real game-worn helmets. And then also Ben Bruss, who for some of you, probably when you were in diapers, you remember Ben Bruss hitting some shots that were very important. But we'll get things kicked off, and I want everybody just to have a chance to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about who their favorite athlete is. And I'll start with Alex Strofe. Can you just tell everybody who you are, what you do, and who your favorite athlete is of all time?
Yeah, great question to start. Thanks, Kyle. Hi, everybody. My name is Alex Strofe. I'm an on-air host, producer, content creator with ESPN Wisconsin and Karma Brands, based in Milwaukee. Really appreciate Kyle also mentioning the producer of his afternoon drive show, which is me, from 2 to 5 p.m. every day. I also host our Green Bay Packers pregame show. I host a podcast 3 times a week, amongst a few other things. So super involved with our social media production and stuff like that as well. So do a little bit of everything with our team at ESPN Milwaukee and ESPN Madison, where I previously spent 3.5 years. My favorite athlete of all time, Brad Nortman, is my favorite athlete of all time. Who I'd like to go next?
Wow, what an introduction. Thank you, Stroke. I host KBN alongside Kyle Wallace from 2 to 5 on 94.5 ESPN Milwaukee, 100.5 ESPN Madison, and 1430 Beaver Dam. He already told you that. I've only been doing this for now a few years and this full time for a little over a year. I've had a long journey to this point, which I'm sure I'll get into it with more depth. I grew up in Brookfield, Wisconsin, played at the University of Wisconsin, was a punter on the football team from 2008, 2011, culminated in 2 Rose Bowls, and then was drafted by the Carolina Panthers, played there for 4 years, and then 2 years for the Jacksonville Jaguars, played in Super Bowl 50 for the Panthers, For those keeping track at home, yes, I lost the Super Bowl and 2 Rose Bowls and state championship for football when I played there. So second place Brad is the moniker on KBM that I've been given the nickname of, but quite the journey nonetheless. Favorite football player or favorite athlete is a football player for me, a teammate of mine, Luke Kuechly. Ashton, you're up.
Thanks, Brad, and way to go, Alex. Way to kiss his butt right away, nice and early. That was good to see. I'm Ashton Rahman, the executive producer for ESPN Milwaukee. I get the distinct pleasure and honor, and I actually do mean that, to get to work with these three and fine individuals every single day. I handle everything from production to imaging to commercials to on the air to running our internship program to sitting in air checks to pretty much anything that goes on the air. I try to have a hand in without actually forcing anyone to listen to me talk. So sorry about for the next hour and that happening. But anything that comes to kind of coaching and sharing my passion with others within the building, and then also trying to make sure that our product is the best it can be. That is what I do every single day, and it is such a fun job to do. And my favorite athlete, I'm going to go extremely niche here. I'm going to go the Chicago White Sox, Paul Konerko, because that's my favorite team, and that is where I grew up. So I don't know if it gets any more me than that.
Thank you. I love that. I love that. And before we start getting into some of these questions, I want you all to know as well is that there's a chat function here. And in the chat function, I'll start it off here by saying hello. If you have any questions, make sure you put your questions inside of there, because though I wrote some questions down that we had before time, this is about you all. So I want to make sure if anything pops in your head about the journey, about the job, how to get the career, anything about us that you want to know about just how you can work in sports, definitely pop it in there, because this is an opportunity to have access to some award-winning individuals, some people who have been working in the field for a while and have different journeys to get to the point of where we are all at today. So remember, it is all about you all. So make sure you do right inside the chat box if you have any questions. Any questions that you have throughout the day. So first, I want to get started with you, Ashton, and talking about so much. You talked about what you did behind the scenes, the stuff that a lot of people don't know about, right? The live reads, the writing copy, the coaching talent. Can you talk about why you chose to work in the field of broadcast radio?
Absolutely. I mean, it's pretty simple. I grew up listening to, again, in Chicago, I grew up listening to The Score in Chicago for my whole life. It was something that my dad always listened to when he would drive to and from work. And anytime I was in the car with him, I was listening, and I just kind of always enjoyed it. And when Bill Simmons' podcast became such a big thing, I was always listening to that. So the sports media and kind of figuring out a way, like, how can I be someone that just was always talking to my friends and talking to other people about sports and just kind of having fun with them. How can I do that as a career? And after a little bit of a journey, I kind of found a unique opportunity to go to just like a 1 year program where it was labor intensive and hands on, and kind of just giving me the opportunity to learn everything when it came to broadcasting on TV, web, and ultimately in radio. That was the most important thing to me, was kind of getting to that radio world. So I found myself graduating and getting a job in Milwaukee right away, and I've been here at the same place for 10 years. And I've had very different roles within my career here. I've gone from a nighttime producer to an overnight producer to running Bucks and Brewers and Packers radio network producing to producing morning shows, afternoon shows, midday shows, to what I do now, which is I don't produce on a daily basis anymore. I do fill in still, but now it's just kind of working on everything. But I've gone through everything it is, and I think the reason that why I love it so much and what would draw me to it to start is like the creativity of just kind of getting to be yourself on the air and having fun with other people who have not the same thing that they want to talk about, but as long as it's kind of within the sports world, like everyone has an opinion on sports.
No, that's fantastic, Ashton. Strophy, how about yourself? What made you get into broadcasting as you turned on your radio voice when you answer this question?
Yeah, I mean it's a question that dates back a long time, I think, right? Like, so for me, I grew up in Green Bay, so obviously a huge Packers fan, huge football fan. Not to make this a sob story, but I had heart surgery when I was really young, so I could never play contact sports, right? I couldn't play football, I couldn't play hockey, I couldn't play wrestling, baseball I couldn't play. So very early on, I figured out, I might not be able to be an NFL player when I grow up. That dream was shattered for me much earlier than other kids. Brad, obviously that dream was never shattered. Kyle, he probably didn't figure that out until a year or two ago that he wasn't going to make it to the NFL. He might still be hoping, but anyway, so I just kind of always wanted to be around sports. I watched Sports Center and I was like, hey, that's cool. I listened to the pop radio station in Green Bay growing up, WIXX, and I would call in and, I made friends with the DJs there, some of which are still there. And radio was kind of always it for me. So, but in high school, I got involved with I went to Denmark, just south of Green Bay, small town. So I worked for the newspaper there, which was a weekly paper that they allowed me to cover high school sports when I was in school, which was really neat. Parlayed that into working for a couple other papers locally. And then I got to college. I went to UW Stevens Point and the legendary 90 FM. And I stumbled in there my first week on campus. And, from that point forward, it was radio, right? Ashton mentioned some of the creative elements. I got involved with our volunteer production team, making imaging and what's the nonprofit equivalent of commercials and stuff like that. And, I was lucky enough to go to a small school. So I got just a ton of opportunity. And then, my senior year, which was 2020, the fall of 2020, I saw there was a part-time opening in Madison. I said, screw it. Let's see what happens. Threw my hat in the ring and ultimately ended up getting a part-time job, as I mentioned, as a producer and board op. So I made the commute, which was 90 minutes one way, a couple times a week. And luckily, I didn't scare them off too much in my first 6 months where things worked out where I got hired full time. So why I chose it, I don't know. I've always liked entertainment. I was a theater kid.
That's news.
You didn't know that? Yeah, I was in musicals growing up. I was in forensics, and I always really liked entertainment. And obviously, I love sports. I love the NFL. I love college basketball. So I wanted to find a way to get paid to talk about it and be around it. And here we are, 4+ years in, and feel very lucky. But it's also more than just being in sports, right? It's being in radio. It's knowing the production elements. It's knowing what makes a good broadcast. And it's just all stuff I love. And I got really lucky that it was kind of a perfect storm for me.
Yeah, what I love about both of your stories is the fact that you talk about everything that you did, right? It's not just being on air, it's all the behind the scenes stuff, all the driving of the, 90 miles each way or 90 minutes each way in order to get there, right? That is part of the journey that I think a lot of us have in common is that we didn't get here overnight. We put in a lot of the hard work to get here, right? And that takes time. But over time, Stroh finds himself hosting his own show, producing a show as well, hosting a Green Bay game day pregame show. I find myself running a radio station and hosting as well. Ashton finds himself as an executive producer making huge decisions for a major market in Milwaukee when it comes to that, and also just an expert in GKB, Good Karma Brands as a whole, as an important voice. So I really think it comes down to understanding is when people ask you to do things and opportunities arise, don't be afraid to raise my hand and say, yes, I'll do it, because that could always lead to your next opportunity. Now, we all have a different journey of how we got to where we're at. But Brad, you were a little bit different because, as we know, you played in the NFL, and then you had a little different career before that. Can you talk about your journey of getting from the field to the radio booth?
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. I mean, my journey is a unique one. It's hard to replicate exactly, but I think there's a lot of themes and a lot of truths that I think are universal. So, like I said, I was a punter for the Carolina Panthers and Jacksonville Jaguars. It's one of those things where, man, you're in your 20s and you feel like you're peaking in life. You're sort of always reminded the NFL, not for long. Think about things afterward. And to me, my afterward plan was always in finance. I was an accounting major, got my master's of finance, CPA, CFP, nerd alert, nerd alert. So there was a lot of that was my focus. However long I could take it, that was my focus. But I loved playing in the NFL. I loved competition. I loved the locker room. I loved every single thing about it. It was very bittersweet to move on. I mean, I'm like 99% of the people where the league just decided to move on and I got no more opportunities. It wasn't for me, hanging up the cleats purposely. So when it was clear that I wasn't going to make it back in the NFL after 6 years, I took that next step to finance. And I worked in the investment area for 4 years. And it was okay. I was capable. I was good at it. There was parts I enjoyed, and there was parts it didn't turn me on. It didn't make me come alive. And I think at that moment, I was thinking about my time in the NFL, and I thought to myself, I will never love what I do again. And it was like a real low moment, honestly. Like the transition out of the NFL takes many peaks and valleys, mostly valleys. And that was a valley. And that was not even just like, I want to play again. That was like, I'm never even going to reclaim what I had. So eventually I was working and moved back to Milwaukee, was working here. And that's when Good Karma Brands reached out for me to be a part as a player analyst of hosting pregame and postgame for Wisconsin Badger football games. So we call it ESPN Wisconsin College Game Day. So I was like, that's great. Like I'll be excited to do it. I'll work, 5 days a week in normal business, finance hours. And on Saturdays during the fall, I'll spend them in Madison and doing that. And I was hosting alongside Alex Strofe. So he's the one who was able to coach me up early on and make me look pretty decent. And then from there, it was just a combination of, I think I had some initial talent and the station wanted to change a lineup and I expressed my interest and the company expressed theirs. And after about a year of doing College Game Day and doing other things with the station, it was an opportunity to do it full time. It took me all of about 2 minutes to say, oh, absolutely, I would love to do that. And I've been doing that now for a full time for a little under a year and a half. And I think from when I think about my journey, football on the field to finance. I mean, dressing up. For the guys that know me here, they know I don't like dressing up. I wear issue gear every day, dressing up, and it's all very sterile and calculated. To now doing this, which is at the other end of the spectrum, where it's very creative and very demonstrative and very opinionated, things that sometimes don't always come natural. A couple things that I think of as I've been through the process was, I think a lot of times people will suggest, hey, just, look at what the world needs and go there, or just find what you're passionate about. And there's some truth in that. But I think like what you got to find is the intersection of like what makes you come alive and what are you good at. I never thought I would be a punter. I was just really good at it. And it's amazing what you fall in love with when you're really good at it. So I just fell in love with punting, but that was never my goal to be an NFL punter. But I fell in love with it because I was pretty good at it. And it also then made me come alive. Like I had a desire to do that. I would say it's the same thing here. I had some initial talent at it, which was great. Had a long way to go and still do. But more than that, this one is about like coming to life. It's not boring. I wake up every morning excited to go to work. And I would say that's the other thing. If you're waking up in the morning and you're not on fire and excited for what you get to do, man, you're just missing out. Like you spend a lot of time at work and the people at work. And if you're not enjoying it, like you're wasting a huge part of your life. And I get that not everyone can just do that immediately, but find the intersection of what makes you come alive and what you're good at. And if you're not loving what you're doing, what are you doing? You're missing out.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Brad. Really quickly, the chat function we found out does not work, but that's okay because we have a Q&A function, a question and answer function. So if you have any questions, Reed, I see you. Anonymous attendee, what up? I see you as well. Definitely, if you have any questions for us, we will get to those questions, but hit the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen if you have any questions, and we will answer every single question that you have today because that's how we roll. But Strophy, I want to get to you about this next one because you're a kid who had a dream, right? You talked about you couldn't have the dream on the field, but you had a dream of actually making it in the radio, and you're doing that right now. So for aspiring broadcasters, what should these students be doing today to set themselves up for tomorrow?
Well, I think the biggest part of the question you just asked me is you're doing it, right? Like the ones that are spending a Monday night trying to learn and grind and make connections, that's half the freaking battle, man, right? Like I could give you the lame, boring advice, which is true, but it's lame and boring, which is do everything, say yes to everything, get your reps, right? Like that's all very important. But this is half the battle. This was huge for me, right? And this is why I love doing stuff like this with the WBA and Kyle and Michelle, because the reason I found Good Karma is because I was a college student at what at the time was at Madison. This year it will be at Lambeau, this student forum and awards that they did every year. I met Greg Scalzo there, who at the time was our afternoon drive host and our sales manager in Madison. He's now our boss in Milwaukee. He's all of our boss. He's the market manager, oversees 1017 The Truth, ESPN Milwaukee, and 620 WTMJ. I had a really good conversation with him during speed networking at a WBA event, and we hit it off. We found we have similar things that make us tick, and long story short, he's now my boss. So I think building connections and taking advantage of the great resources the WBA offers you, but also think about your universities. Think about the opportunities you have right in front of you, whether that's student radio station, student TV, student newspaper. Every college has, sports teams, right? A lot of them need coverage, whether that's written or spoken or, live play-by-play. So it was a mixture of going to a smaller university, having a massive signal at our college radio station, 90 FM, getting involved my sophomore year as a sports director, my junior and senior year as the station manager. And I got to learn so many things, right? Like I never walked in there intending to run the station for 2 years, but I picked up sales knowledge. I picked up marketing knowledge. I picked up production knowledge on top of the sports stuff, which was always the lane I wanted to go in. So to answer your question, the people that are watching this are already doing it, which is great.
I love that because I like to take a time to just talk about my journey. Is overall, when Strofe was talking about it, it made me think back because I was the guy that, I knew I wanted to do it, but I didn't know what my journey would be. And I just kind of let go and, let wherever the world took me, I went. And so for me, my journey is interesting because I started with Good Karma Brands back when it's called Good Karma Broadcasting, my freshman year, summer of my freshman year of college. And the way I got my internship, which is something that I highly encourage, like Strofe said, you 18 folks who joined today, that's what's up. And definitely we have an internship program, spring, summer, and the fall. These are the people that I want, the hungry individuals, because you all are going to find success. But for me, I was on the radio at University of Wisconsin Whitewater, and a former Whitewater alum was listening to the station because he was on his way to come talk to my class. He heard me on the radio. He said, "Hey, I like the way you sounded on Hawk Talk. Come talk to me after class." I said, "Cool." And so again, young 18-year-old me, I went to talk to him and he said, "Call this person." I called them. And I mean, we're talking 15 years later.
Oh,
15
you're
years.
old. It's okay. You're
I
old.
know. 15 years later, here I am, right? But that all just came from somebody offering an opportunity, and I just took it and ran with it. So taking advantage of an opportunity today, and trust me, I know everybody here. If you reach out to us, we'll provide our information, and or Kyle can provide you all with our information. We all will get back to you because we are all passionate about not just broadcasting and radio, but we're passionate about bringing up the future of radio. So for me, I think about the tips that I can give, and for anybody aspiring, is chase your dream and don't stop chasing it and do everything you can to really find that avenue you want to go down. But Ashton, I do want to ask you a question because what you do is you coach talent, right? You coach talent, you coach producers, and you also ideate topics, right? You are, for me in our show prep, you're the guy that coaches me up in show prep of how I should go about things. So overall, what tips can you provide to those listening here is how can they just be an overall good radio broadcaster?
It's a great question. And Kyle, I'm glad that you and I get to do this because now everyone can see the inside of when you ask a question, usually in a pre-show meeting, I kind of go back at you right away that you need to give me an answer, but now it's a reverse, which is kind of fun. So I know Alex and Brad are appreciating that. It's an interesting idea of like what makes you good. I think the number one thing, and I will say this word to anyone that asks what makes a good broadcaster or what makes a good radio show or what makes a good producer, is you have to be vulnerable and you have to be willing to try different things. And being vulnerable doesn't have to be your deepest, darkest secret. Like, that's not what it is. It's just like, are you willing to have the conversations about topics that interest you? Are you willing to look at things from a different lens? Are you willing to, for example, if Alex is thinking about it one way, maybe I'm thinking about it a different way. Are you willing to have the conversation and talk it out either on air or in a production meeting and figure out what works to make it sound interesting? Because you could have a thought, and if you're just talking at someone for an hour, for a segment, for however long it is, that can get really boring if you don't have kind of a reason to get all that information out and why it is you're passionate about it. So I think vulnerability is number one, is a super important thing, and how you become good at it, but also the passion, as I just mentioned. Like if you're passionate about any topic, and I mean any topic, if you're passionate about it, you're going to find a way to make someone else passionate about it. And Kyle, I think you and I always go back and forth about this, about different Packers related topics that you and I talk about, or Brad, when he's talking about Badgers related things. I always want to give me the most passionate little bit of morsel of thing that you were kind of really in on, bring that out, and then we can figure out a way to make it sound good on the air. And I think that's kind of the more interesting ththing is if you're listening to this and you're here, and then Alex, you're so right about talking about how you're here already. That's part of the battle. Is like you just have to be doing different things, and you have to show up, and you have to go shadow things, and you have to reach out to people, and you have to be willing to learn and kind of see what the gritty, grimy nature of like you just have to learn all these different things. But all those will help make you a better broadcaster. And I think Brad's situation is so unique where it's like you kind of understand it, you do it, you have a whole different career, you try this one thing, and you're like, oh, this is kind of fun, I like this. Then you realize like I might be kind of good at this. How do I get better at it? And you're always showing up and getting better. And I think that's another thing about going to being vulnerable is you have to be willing to make yourself better and not think you're awesome or good even sometimes. You just have to be able to take that and learn and run with it. Because if you are willing to learn different things, you're willing to get better and you're willing to get better at different things. I never thought I was going to be in the position I was in. I wanted to be on the air. That was one thing I wanted to do. Tried it, realized it wasn't for me. It wasn't my favorite part about it was I realized what I thought sounded good on the air was a lot better than what I was actually putting out on the air live in action. I can think quick on my feet. I can have fun as a producer. I can do those different things, but my skill set was better served at working with everybody and kind of ideating and coming up with different things and putting out on the air and on the station like what sounds good and shoot, that could be a commercial, that could be a little hotkey, that could be any sort of thing, it could be talking. You just have to try different things. And I think that it took me a little while to figure out that being vulnerable on the air and off the air was an important thing, but I think once I figured it out, it's the message I try to spread most to anybody is you just got to be willing to try it and open up.
Most definitely. I love that. I love that. Now, overall in radio, and this goes to you, Brad, is that, we all grow up just like those here, right? We all emulate people, right? Like there's somebody that we think of when we wanted to grow up, and I know I love Stuart Scott growing up, like booyah. And some of y'all may or may not know who Stuart Scott is. He's been, deceased now for a while, RIP. But we all emulate somebody, right? And so overall, how did you go from Brad wanting to emulate somebody's personality to really finding your own personality, who Brad Nortman is on air, finding yourself?
Well, it's a process for sure because who that is evolves. And I think what Ashton is describing as far as vulnerability, it sounds like authenticity to me, right? You have to be yourself. You have to be authentic on air because it becomes obvious if someone is being inauthentic, someone's not being themselves. So you have to look at the people that you look up to in whatever industry you're going for and taking a sliver of them and then feel like, how can I allow that to grow within me? Like what is an area that's maybe reflecting an area that I want to grow? And how can I have more growth there? So like for me, in the radio world especially, I always loved Dan Patrick and Colin Cowherd. I was listening to those dudes when I was playing in the NFL, where I'm like, man, like those guys they're smart, they're thoughtful. Like Cowherd is definitely more think things through, make an argument, have an opinion. And Dan Patrick and his whole crew is like, they're kind of just like fun and light. And it feels like you're eavesdropping on a group of friends. So I liked both of those. And I've tried to figure out how can I make that me. And sometimes it's like a Swiss Army knife, right? Like in some segments, you got to be that here's my opinion, here's my thought, this is my logical reasoning, here's my analogy, love my analogies, and all these things that allow you to be very sports heavy. And then in 15 minutes later, you might be joking around with the people on the show, and it feels like you're at a restaurant shooting it with a bunch of friends. So it's enjoyable to try those different things, but you have to look in yourself and be coachable. That's a big thing. You have to be coachable as far as what does somebody else see in you? Because I think oftentimes I would go on the air and maybe just start rolling. And I think good coaches will allow you to stay authentic, allow you to stay you, but be like, you're doing this, here's how you can do it even better. So and like Strofe said, it's just reps. Like I go back to my early days on air and they're rough. Like they're not good and it's come a long way. So to me, I think it's admiring people, looking at places that you admire about them and how can you shape that to be your own. But don't go be a carbon copy of somebody else, right? There's already that out there. The best thing you can do is go be yourself to the fullest degree on air. That's what people want. And I think even in a world, like not to get like philosophical, but in a world where just people want authenticity, right? They want real. There's so many things in this world that are not that. They just want authentic, they want real. And if you can provide that, I think you're ahead of already half the people who are trying to do too much to be too much, and you can just tell.
Strofe, how about you? Your overall radio personality, because you have a unique, fan, loud, fun, but like so professional personality. Where I'll be honest, when I heard Strofe for the first time, I said, "Dang, this kid is good, man. He's real good." And so, how did you end up going from wanting to emulate whoever you wanted to emulate, but becoming the Alex Strofer as we know as Strophe?
Well, thank you for the compliment. I'm assuming you're only doing that because we are in front of students. But thank you, I appreciate that. The long and short of it is I'm obsessed with this. Like I mentioned, I got hired in December of 20 to Good Karma. We all know what happened in 2020. Like I mentioned, it was my end of end of junior, beginning of senior year of college at Stevens Point. So I'm 26. I'm the youngest here. Just want to point that out. And I listened. I was listening to 94 WIP in Philadelphia. I was listening to 670 The Score in Chicago. I was listening to 95.3 The Game in San Francisco. Like I listened all over the country to the people that are the best at this to hear what they do best. And sometimes it's style, sometimes it's segments, sometimes it's presentation. And I just, we were all locked in the freaking house, but radio was still happening. So I just took notes of what, different regions are doing. And nationally, like Jim Rome's been a guy for me always. He's kind of a jerk. He's got this unbelievable ego to him where he is on 4 hours a day, every day for the last 3 decades. And he doesn't let anybody else talk. Like his producers don't talk. And I think he is so masterfully insane that's played into my style. Howard Stern, the fearlessness has played into my style. But I'm still me, right? Like my brain's weird. I'm a weird guy. You guys know that. You work with me every day. You can attest. So I try to be me too, right? Like I'm just weird, and luckily I chose a career where I can be weird and I can be a little bit nuts sometimes and kind of a jerk, but also like I like to think I'm a pretty nice guy overall. But sometimes Kyle, Brad, we work together every day. Sometimes I need to get after you a little bit because whether you contradicted yourself or you said something that didn't make any sense or you mispronounced a word, right? Like that's kind of what I love doing. I like getting after you a little bit. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I think the long and short of it is like I just love this. So I've always listened to the people that are best at it and tried to steal little things, and ultimately it worked well, I think.
Wow, if I could, can I jump in real quick to what Alex just said? I think Brad, we're both just like everything Alex just said was so good. Everything about listening to things that are best and trying to steal from other things. There's an inside joke that I have with another producer for WTMJ Radio. His name is Greg Hill. I trained him. Him and I are kind of in similar positions now. He's with WTMJ News Radio. I'm with ESPN. Listening to the score growing up, Chris Tannehill is the name of one of their main producers, and he is, for my money, the best producer to ever exist in the history of the world when it comes to sports radio. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not, but I took everything I possibly could from things that I learned from him. I reached out to him, I asked him questions, I tried to learn from him and anything that he did on the air, and I was like, how can I take that and make it my own? And I think it's so true about listening to things that are good, and like people get recognized and have recognition for a reason. Go find out why. Listen to it. See how you can take what they do and make it your own. The Dan Levitar show is another big one for me of the unique, creative, like different. How can I be different in this world of like we're just talking about sports? And that's another thing where I tried to as when I was producing every day, and I still do it now at different things. Like how can I make this sound big and different and cool and fun and hook somebody in for 5 seconds if they just happen to randomly be hitting the tuner on the radio, which I know is an insane sentence to say sometimes in 2024, but like I still do it. People still do it. People still get in the car and try to find something to listen to. So I think just kind of it's such a good point of just if you see a clip on social media of a radio host or of a show, like you've never heard of it before, go find out what they do. Go see what it is. Maybe it's something that you've never heard of that you can take and make your own. And maybe it's something that you're like, I don't think that's the type of personality or radio show I want to do. And then you have a column of things you try to stay away from.
And real quick, analogy time. I couldn't help it. A lot of times, sportscasters will try to create like the perfect quarterback, right? Like I want the arm of Dan Marino. I want the toughness of Brett Favre. I want the legs of Michael Vick. I want the heart of whatever, Tom Brady, whatever. And that looks a lot like our world too, right? Because you could look at it and be like, I want the curiosity and the question asking ability of Dan Patrick, best interviewer that there is, in my opinion. I want the timing and the pace of Stephen A. Smith. I want the opinions of Colin Cowherd. So there's all these different like areas that I think each person excels at. And it's not to say like I gotta have my timing be like Stephen A. Smith. I think you look at that and say timing is a critical part of our job. What's my timing? What's my best timing? Curiosity, asking interview questions. It's a critical part of our job. How can I shape my questions to not be yes or no questions? How can I have them be open-ended, thoughtful questions? Opinions. I'm not someone who's naturally opinionated, but opinions are critical. Logical thoughts. What's the best way that I can form concrete opinions and then voice them correctly? So, not that you have to be those people, but it's critical to identify what makes them so good. And part of it, I think you can segment out and for instance, then like with Dan Patrick and be like, he's light, he's a good conversationalist. And you can even do this with like Joe Rogan, right? It doesn't just have to be in sports, but everybody brings a little something to the table that's a universal quality of our business. And then you have to say, he does that so well. What does that look like for me? And how can I shape that?
Thank y'all so much. And again, Q&A, if you have any questions, we definitely want to answer those via Q&A. But now I want to transition a little bit. We talked about behind the mic, but I also want to talk about behind the glass when it comes to radio producers. And four of us here, three of the four of us have been radio producers and still produce radio shows till this day. And so, Ashton, I want you just to talk about like, what does a radio producer do and why is it so critical to the thing that we do when it comes to radio?
The broadest way before I go deep that I will describe it is you have to keep the train on the tracks. And whether you decide the tracks are off course or not is totally up to you and the show. And that's kind of the different aspect of it. But producers have to make sure that things get executed for the sales and the marketing team. They have to make sure that the conversations are staying in a direction. Like it could be a weird conversation, but make sure it's one weird conversation, not five weird conversations in a minute, in a 30-second span. You have to make sure everyone's on the same page. You're constantly communicating with the driver of the show on if there's calls, if there's not. Hey, did you see this on the YouTube comment section? Hey, did you see this text? Let's do this live read, or we're going way past time. Let me get this guest. You are constantly thinking ahead, and Alex is, I'm assuming, going to know what my next phrase is of the most important thing you have to do as a producer, and that's be an active listener. You have to be listening at all times to everything within the show, because as he said, one thing he likes to do and is very good at is going back at the hosts of Kyle, Bruss, and Norman when they say something, whether they contradict themselves, whether they get it wrong, whether it's a funny moment, whether Jason Wilde is a guest and says something and it's like, wait a second, maybe I'm the only person that heard that. Did they hear it? What am I going to do with that information that I just heard? And you just have to constantly pay attention and think of ways that you can utilize something that's happening on the air at that point in time, or something that's happening behind the scenes when it comes to fans of the show or people listening in, or maybe you have to keep an eye on social media to see if there's breaking news or if there's a press conference going on where something weird was said. Like you have to just constantly be thinking of ways to continue to make the show better. When we have new producers, one thing that I always try to challenge them on is if something happens, it doesn't have to be a tragedy. If something happened and you had to host the show for some reason, could you do it? Maybe it wouldn't be the best show ever, but would you have enough segments worth of thoughts and things that you were prepared for to do a show? Doesn't mean it's going to be good. It doesn't mean it's going to be awful. It's just, can you do it? And I think that's a really crucial part of being a producer when it comes to actually getting ready for a show. And then there's the little stuff of like printing out live reads, like you mentioned, Kyle, a little bit ago. Like that's an important thing to do. If you forget it and you don't get it done on the air, then that's one critical thing that's not going to be executed for your whole team. And it's little stuff like that. And you just have to constantly be looking. You have to think ahead. You have to say, I heard this audio clip. Maybe there's something here. Maybe there's not. But I'm going to bring it to my team and say, you guys hear this? Or you're starting text message threads with them. You're keeping up. You're asking them for opinions. I go into what's the first thing I say? when I go into any pre-show meeting, if I'm leading the meeting as a producer or just as someone sitting in, I say, well, all right, X person, what are you hot on today? Let's figure out first what you want to talk about, and then we'll shape it from there. You just kind of have to have a very forward-thinking and active-thinking mindset when it comes to being a producer, and then when it comes to the actual like production of the show and how it sounds, that's just every show is going to sound different. Every person is different. A lot of shows that I am more drawn to use a lot of little drops and what we call hotkeys because it's a little page that we literally just press in our studio, and that's something that I love, and it always draws attention to me. But some shows are just Brad mentioned, and Alex, you guys talked about the different hosts you listen to, and like maybe it's just Jim Rome talking for 15 straight minutes, and that's the best production you could possibly get it because he's so good at what he does. Like that's it's all show dependent, but as a producer, you have to be able to think on your feet. You have to be able to hear something and do something with it. And then also, even though we only have 2 ears, you have to be able to have four. You have to be listening for a bunch of different things and also answering phone calls and making sure whoever's on the air isn't swearing and making sure that if your boss comes into the room that you can answer that question and answer. You have to be able to do. It's not quite the yes and game of improv, but it is like hey, what else am I doing? What's next? What else can I be doing?
A lot of times,
No, go
go
ahead,
ahead,
Kyle.
Stro. Okay, well, I'll get to you, Stro, really. A lot of times I see it as like, I think about a center in the offensive line analogy.
Yeah,
They're probably the
there we go.
smartest people on the football field, and they are able to pick up, hey, this guy, check that one. They know everything that's going on. They're the foundation, they're backbone, right? And so producers are so important. And Strofe, I want to get you to answer, but also have a question for you because again, you and I both started our journeys as producers, board opping. Why was it to you, in your perspective, why was starting your journey as a producer more beneficial for you to where you are now?
I mean, I think this goes to something I always say to college students who I talk to or interns. Like versatility is so key in this business, especially in 2024. And when you guys are in your early 30s, I'm in my mid 20s, and I imagine a lot of the people listening are
Nobody
my
asked you
age.
for to send our age now, Strofe. You ain't got to tell people that.
I just turned 30. You can't keep doing this.
But like a lot of people listening and watching this are my age or younger and even younger, right? And could be 18, 19. So they've got 40, 50 years ahead of them. So this thing's evolving, dude, right? Like I'm a video producer too now. Our show is on YouTube every day. So I'm coming up with lower third graphics and coming up with break screens. Um, so I think that was why it was important to me. Obviously, if I would have been offered day one, Kyle, full transparency, if they said, "Hey, go on the air, just be a radio host," of course I would have said yes, right? Like I think all
Would
of
you
us
be
would.
as good though?
No, not even close. Not even close. You learn the production, you learn the behind the scenes, I think the biggest thing for me, and I was going to say this when Ashton was talking, I was thinking this, the shows I produce don't sound like the shows I would host, if that makes sense, right? Because how I would do a topic is much different than the way Kyle Brust and Nortman are going to do a topic, or if it's just you and Brad one day, right? You guys are going to do the topic a lot different than maybe I would do it if I was hosting it solo or with Brad. And that's okay, right? Like it always goes back to, is it entertaining? Is it passionate? Is the knowledge there? Is the opinion there? Right? I think we call that the poke method: passion, opinion, knowledge, entertainment. Uh, um, so those are the four things that I look for. So when you three on our afternoon drive show, the third being Ben Brust, are talking about Aaron Rodgers and the Jets being horrible, or is Jordan Love underwhelming this year, or whatever, right? It's my job to find ways without turning my microphone on to make this a better listen. Is it, we've got a bit on our show where if we get into a conspiracy or somebody's got a weird idea, I'm gonna slowly turn up the slider that plays the X-Files theme song. If you don't know what that is, look it up. It's very tinfoil hat music. Or if Brad is talking and I have an old drop of Kyle saying, Brad, you're an idiot. I don't need Kyle to say, Brad, you're an idiot. I can do it. I can do it. I can make Kyle say something he's not actually saying. So those are the things where, I know I'm making an impact. I'm helping this be a funnier listen or a more entertaining listen without cracking my mic. While I think I'm pretty good at that too, that's not my job. We have three hosts to do the talking. I'm the production element. I'm making this sound sexier and more fun to listen to while you're driving down I-94. So, I don't know. Once again, I don't know. I go on these tangents, Kyle. I don't know if that answered your question, but
I mean,
that's
you work
Not
in
at all
radio. You
unlike
love to
every
hear
day
yourself.
that we deal with you.
Yeah, yeah. You love to hear yourself talk. No, that was fantastic. It really was. And I do want to answer some of these questions. So again, we have the question and answer function. Now is the time to definitely utilize that as we answer some of your questions before we get to the back end and wrap up here. But the first question we have here is, what type of major do you need for sports broadcasting? Now, me personally, I went to the University of Wisconsin Whitewater for literally broadcast journalism. And so broadcast journalism was my journey. I know Strofe, very similar journey. But then again, you have a finance guy here as well who I mean, though he had a cheat code, he played in the NFL.
you had a cheat code. Yeah, you had a cheat code.
He had a good leg. So I mean, Ashley, what about yourself?
So I went to Bowling Green State University in Ohio for a year, and I actually was part. I was going to do sports management. I wanted to work for front office for a baseball team, preferably, but any sort of team. Like I just wanted to work in sports. I've always known that. I know I kind of left that out, but like I've always wanted to work in sports. And I thought, hey, how cool would it be to work for a team and be part of big trades and big signings and all these things. And meanwhile, for that 1 year that I was there, going to, I'm constantly listening to podcasts. I'm start talking to my friends that I made. I'm listening to the radio. I'm listening to Chicago stations in Ohio where I am, and man, this is really fun. And then, long story short, is it wasn't for me. Just being far away from home, I wanted to be closer to home, so I went back and thought of the things that I wanted to do. And while I was at Bowling Green, they had a very well known student radio sports station, and where they broadcasted all the games. They had their own websites, and I got a little bit involved in that and kind of saw it and started to fall even more in love with like the behind the scenes. And then yeah, I found it's called the Illinois Media School, and it was a 1 year like hands-on intensive experience. I learned a lot in that year that I think I even learned more so after I got hired by WTMJ 2 weeks after that kind of program kind of ended. But I don't think it's anything unlike I would have learned over a longer period of time doing communications, doing a broadcasting degree. I had a million different internships, which is an important thing. I had one internship at a low powered radio station in my hometown, and I got very lucky with that because being able to do that meant that I got to do literally everything at that station. Alex, you were talking about being able to run the student station. Like that's being able to learn that stuff at such a young age and kind of see it, even if you don't understand it yet, just trying to see it and learn it. You just got to be a sponge about so many different things. It's so important. And whatever the program is, like you can find a way to be part of something. So the long story short is like I don't have a traditional path. I don't know if anyone in radio actually does have a traditional path per se. We just all kind of find our way there.
Yeah, no, I think traditional path is probably strong, right? Like for Kyle and I, we have the traditional degrees. I was a media studies major at Stevens Point. But I mean, like I've met so many radio hosts that are biologists and politicians and
Yep.
like I don't know that there's a necessary degree to get into it. I mean, but if you're in college and you want to grind toward this, journalism, media studies, communication is typically your quote unquote traditional path. It's the one Kyle and I took. And it'll certainly set you up for success post grad. But I think at the end of the day, what you do in those 4 years, if you're going to do a 4 year traditional college, right? If you're at one of the UW schools, Whitewater, like Kyle went to, or Stevens Point, like me, or Oshkosh, I know has a really good program. It's the opportunities you're creating for yourself. It is the student radio station. It's the student newspaper. It's being at the games. It's working in the athletic department. That's going to set you up for success a hell of a lot more than a textbook is. It's just flat out the truth. While the classes are important and you will pick up important knowledge, I learned 10 times as much, probably more than that, from working in the athletic department and the student radio station that I ever did in the classroom. And I'm grateful for my education. I'm grateful for my experience at Stevens Point, but I learned way more that was applicable to my career outside of the classroom than in it.
100%. Now, Brad, a question here from Reed, and Reed kind of alluded to what you said earlier. Did any of you get involved in something that didn't feel right or what you wanted to do? And he mentioned kind of you, Brad, with finance. How did you make the most of that in terms of your career trajectory?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a bad feeling when you're in it because it feels like you're wasting time. It feels like there's a disconnect. But let me just provide a little bit of encouragement, maybe. Like my faith compels me to believe that life is about seasons, and there are seasons of preparation, and that's how I view my finance time, right? It wasn't wasted. It was a season of preparation. There are things that I did during those 4 years that make me a better radio host. It makes me think differently. It makes me look at things differently. It makes me reason differently. And I had to do lots of different public speaking things there. I had to be in rooms with bigwigs, so to speak, and I had to have the confidence to be able to speak knowledgeably. And so whatever it is that you're drawing from, it's not wasted. It likely is a season of preparation. And I would also say, like, the best thing that and this is not my personality, right? I'm a control dude. I just like love being in control of things. But like, I think the minute that you view your career, like not with like closed fists, but like open hands, like I'm willing to be flexible. I'm willing to go where my career takes me and to then use wherever that is, whatever season you're in, to just take it seriously and pull from it what you can. Now, I wouldn't say like just be content there and wait along. While I was in finance, I was always realizing I don't want to do this for 40 years. Let me see what else there is for me. And you got to try things. Until you start trying things, everything's a hypothetical. Oh, what if I could do this? Oh, if I could do that. If you don't actually start taking low risk bets toward trying to do certain things, it's never going to come to fruition. So for me, that's what I would say is that there are things that you can learn that can actually separate you from doing what you're doing that will make you better in your next role, and to just realize that it's not wasted, because there was a lot that I've learned that actually helps separate me now that I'm in my next area. But keep seeking though. Like if you feel like this isn't it and you don't like, the wall that ladder is leaned up against, then by definition, any more climbs up the ladder is going the wrong direction. You got to find that wall that you want your ladder to be on, and then start taking your free time to be able to start pursuing that. And that's exactly what I did.
Love it, love it, love it. You can tell he was in a great locker room, boy. He got all type of analogies and stories. I love it, Brad. And so, Strofe, this one's for you. How important is social, and this is from Jack. Shout out to you, Jack. How important is social media / Twitter in growing your brand and networking and making connections? Because I know for me and Brad, we're a little bit older, where we had to kind of grow our social, where you came up with like social is imperative to who you are as a personality, as like on air, but also off air.
Yeah. So first off, Jack, thanks for the question. Kyle, Brad, PSA for you two that I actually haven't told you yet. We are going to create a crash course for you two on social media, coming to your emails in the next 2 weeks. That's not a joke either. So,
Oh.
yeah, I think it's huge. For me, I think it was a huge reason I got as many reps as I did. I met a lot of people through Twitter when I was in college. So like the 2020 NFL season, I did a all digital pre and post game show for before and after Packers games from my bedroom in Stevens Point. I did a lot of online writing and stuff like that. And I mean, those were all connections I met through social media. Now, the other part of the social thing is I mentioned, being versatile, understanding media is evolving. I don't think radio will ever go away as long as I'm alive, but I think other ways to consume it continue to get bigger and bigger, right? Podcasts and YouTube and TikTok is a big one I've been trying to get myself into and put my content out there the last year or so. When you're in college, whether you are doing a podcast in your dorm room, which I did, or you're doing, the student radio station, which I also did, record that stuff, put it out there. It doesn't hurt you, right? Get it on TikTok, get it on YouTube, post a 1 minute clip on Twitter. I can't encourage that enough. And within that, you're going to get video editing knowledge. You're just going to make yourself more versatile. So I think it's huge to put your work out there. And then when it comes to I think there was another half on that question of like creating connections, Twitter, LinkedIn, like doing stuff like this, Jack, it's huge, right? Like, so getting with, guys like the ones that are here and all the other sessions that the WBA is going to be putting on. I think that's huge too in creating connections, because it shows you give a damn. And believe it or not, sometimes that's a high bar. Showing you care, believe it or not, for something as fun as we do and how cool it is that we do, showing you care, it goes a long way. So that would be my answer on that. I think it's hugely important, but just getting the reps and putting it out there, man. I think that's awesome.
Thanks, Strophy. Christopher Pittner. Shout out to you, Kyle. I run Hawk Talk currently for WSUW at Whitewater. UW, baby. As an alum, how did you guys keep content fresh day in and day out? And what advice would you guys give me and to my other hosts to keep things fresh through the semester? I know for me overall, I know when I was on Hawk Talk, we talked about the stories of the day, right? So that allowed for us to talk about things that people cared about, but also things we were passionate about. We talked about earlier about being your authentic self. Well, when you're in college, that is the field where you just get to try things, right? Like you don't have you're not worried about ratings. You're just getting there and you're learning because this is a playing field for you to get better. And so overall, I say everybody, obviously we love to talk sports. So we love to talk football, NFL. So if you're talking about the Simpsons football game between the Cowboys and the Bengals today, cool. If you're going to talk about I don't know what's going on in the game tonight, but whatever big thing from the game, Packers wise, because we're here in Wisconsin, but really talk about things you are all passionate about, but also you got to talk about things you can debate. I remember back when I was in college, me and Steven Johnson. Steven is really good at what he does. He doesn't work in radio full time, but he does some stuff down in Illinois. Me and him used to get into it all the time, but it was fantastic radio. Like it was tense, but it was good. I didn't realize at that time that was just helping me get better. And so overall, talk about the things that you care about. Ashton, you being an executive producer, do you have any advice you want to share with these young students on this one?
Yeah, Kyle, and I think Christopher, that's a great question. And that's a great thing you should always be thinking about. Anyone on this call that wants to get into content, whether it's as a producer, whether it's play-by-play, whether it's actually being on the air, like you just kind of have to always think of different ways to be better. Story of the day and is a great one, Kyle. And also another thing that you should always think about is, and I've had to embrace this more, is you never want to end an argument. You always want to start an argument. Any argument that happens, you do not want it to end. You just want it to keep going. And it doesn't have to get malicious, obviously. It can be friendly, it can be funny, it can be an argument about condiments, it can be an argument about best sandwiches, it can be an argument like these are little things that have happened on the show with these three in front of us. Like that is kind of just something that you just have to be able to start an argument and have a conversation about. And that's such a good point. But the other thing is like how I always think of it is there's always someone new listening. So you could have the same topic every day for 5 straight days, and you're going to have 5 different people every single day that are tuning in to hear you talk about it. Doesn't mean you're going to talk about it the same way necessarily every day, but it can be the same thing. The reason we're so successful as a station and why we're so good at talking about the Packers is because we come in with different angles. There's 3 people that are on the air constantly on this show, Kyle, Bruss, and Norman. Plus, there's Alex, who's basically a fifth person because he counts for multiple people. He is constantly just thinking, Alex, I'm talking about you, about different ways that we can talk about the Packers, in addition to the ways that Kyle and Brad and Ben also want to talk about it. And in addition to anything I wanted to say, maybe that might be an interesting way to talk about it. You just have to think of different ways. Like if I say the word Packers, I mean, there's 1,000 different things that you can come up with of ways to talk about it, whether it has to do with a game that just happened, a game that's going to happen, or a game that may never even happen. But you just have to be willing to kind of think about different ways to talk about stuff and know that there's going to be someone different listening every day. Even if you think there's not, there always is.
Yeah, one quick thing I'd add just about like topics, because for instance, like slow time for us this last year is summertime because it's outside the Packer season and all that. And Jordan Love's contract was the ongoing storyline. It felt like we talked about Jordan Love's contract every day for 4 months when nothing really happens. Things that I try to do in like my own show prep, especially if it's a topic we've talked about a lot, let's say Jordan Love's contract, either zoom in or zoom out. I think that's a good way to think about how can I like look at this from a different angle, right? Almost like a diamond. There's all different types of ways you can look at it. So for instance, like Jordan Love's contract, you could zoom in and be like, it could look a lot different, but is he a top 5 quarterback? Does his play warrant it? What does this do to the salary cap? What more will he have to do in order to be compensated for it? What's too much? What's too little? You could zoom out and say, do you like how the Packers approach quarterbacks? What makes them different from all these other franchises? What's the Packers Super Bowl window? So there's all these different ways you can look at the same topic. This is the challenge though of our business. Like it is the creative muscle that you need to continue to work. And it doesn't really come naturally, just with time and thinking. Kyle, you're on mute.
Classic Kyle.
Muted.
Thank you so much for sharing, Brad. Andrew, I see your comment. I love it. I love it. Keep grinding. Keep working. It seems like you're already doing some great stuff. I told Stroke to make sure he responds to what you said, but I love the fact that you're only a sophomore and you're already doing some big things down there in the Racine Kenosha area. Uh, Anonymous had here, what is the best way to get your name out to local sports teams in order to acquire internships and other opportunities? Anybody want to take a stab at that one?
I'm going to jump in first real quick because I have a vivid memory of this. Is again because I wanted to work for teams. That was like my first passion. The first thing I wanted to do in sports was work for a team. Was go on any single website, look at the directory, and just send a bunch of emails to people. They're going to. I promise you, someone will respond to you. I'm not going to say everyone's going to respond, but someone will respond to you. So if you want to work for a team, send an email to the team and just say, introduce yourself, tell them you're passionate. At the very least, I think one thing I always do if anyone reaches out to me, I try to either set up time to talk on them over Teams, or if they're local, is to come into the studio and shadow us for a day and just see. I mean, I can't think of how many times over the decade that I've been doing this that I've had somebody come into shadow just because they were interested in it. Like, okay, if you're interested in it, come see. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're gonna like it even more. Maybe you're gonna like it less, but you got to see it before you really try. And that is advice that my mom gave me when I was going through this of wanting to do radio. She said, why don't you go to a radio station? Just see, just sit there for a day first, just see if it is something you want to do. And that's exactly what I did. So if you have a sports team or you want to work in sports and for a team, for a league, reach out to them. If you want to work for in radio, find any of us. The as Kyle mentioned a long time ago, and to start of this is the information for how you can reach us can be given to you very easily. And we will reach out and we will talk to you and we will do whatever we can to help give you advice on your journey. But you just got to put yourself out there and reach out and don't let it get to you if someone doesn't respond. It's not an excuse, but it's a very busy business where sometimes it takes a couple of days to go through emails of things like, okay, I think to myself every day, I'm going to answer this. And then I forget to do it. Like this just happens every day. And eventually I will. And I always get back to people. But I think that's an important thing is just don't be afraid to reach out. And if you reach out once and you don't hear back for a month, reach back out again. What's the worst that happens? You get ignored again in your eyes. Well, then you know that's probably not a person you want to work with because maybe they're just not that nice of a person. Like I think you just give it a shot and just reach out to people because I think if you don't, you never know what you're going to miss.
Yeah, the other thing to that too, Ashley, is you never know what teams are looking for, right? So like for
Exactly.
me, I mentioned I grew up in Green Bay, so in the summers I'd go back home, and I think it was the summer between my freshman and sophomore year. I reached out to the Green Bay Blizzard, which is an indoor football team. And long story short, they were looking for somebody to be their home game broadcaster. They didn't really have a budget, so I did it for free the first summer. I just did, it was YouTube only streams. I was by myself. I just did the play by play. And they ended up having a really good year that year. They made the playoffs for the first time in a decade. So I'll take credit on that. But yeah, like I just, it was just me reaching out. And by happenstance, it was my first like real outside of college play by play gig. So you never really know. And you mentioned the word internships. Every team is always hiring interns. So reach out, don't be too pesky, but get after it, and somebody will get back to you, and you'll set yourself up for success that way.
Thank y'all. The next one is from Dylan. Dylan said, thank you guys again for talking today. He's currently a sports director at WRST at UW Oshkosh, and he's done a lot of play-by-play, but have also spent the last year getting into sports talk. Are there individuals who go into both commentating and sports talk after college? That's a great one.
It's a really good question. The answer is yes to the question. The other thing to keep in mind, and I don't want to break any hearts here, full-time play-by-play out of college isn't happening. It is so unbelievably rare. I just want to make sure everybody knows that, right? Like the one gig you could possibly land is baseball because that season's so long. But odds are you're probably doing both. For me, it was producing sports talk when I got hired full time in Madison, and then I was play by play for high school sports, high school football, high school basketball were my main two. So the answer is yes, but full time play by play jobs are really, really, really competitive and really, really, really hard to land. Even I think of somebody that works with us every day, Steve the Homer True. He does a daily sports talk show but he's also the play-by-play voice of the Marquette men's basketball team, which is a pretty premier gig, right? Like one of the best in the state. But that's kind of just a side job for him in comparison to the daily sports talk radio he also does. So the odds are you're going to be doing a little bit of both. Until Wayne Larrivee and Matt LePay retire, those are really the only, Brewers, Bucks, Packers, Badgers are really your only full-time play-by-play gigs in the state. And when you think about that, there's probably only, I don't know, somewhere between 200 and 300 full-time play-by-play jobs in the country. So it's really hard to get a full-time one. And all power to you. Good luck. Chase it, right? Like I would love that gig one day too. But so yes is the answer.
Yeah, and don't let stroke kill your dreams. Yes, it will definitely happen, but you definitely know that you'll have to do both, and eventually the cream rises to the top. So
Mhm.
eventually what will happen is you'll get that opportunity to do that. Or we have someone we work with named Gabe Neisel who does the pregame show and halftime show for Marquette Golden Eagles basketball, right? Like there's going to be a lot of opportunities and you'll end up finding your way. So definitely be prepared to do both. And then eventually greatness will shine and you'll have the opportunity to make a decision. So that's our answer for that. And then the last one here in anonymous, this is kind of goes to you said, what advice do we have for seniors and recent grads? And this one I'll tee up to Brad and everybody else. Just like, can we leave everybody here? And thank everybody so much for joining. But Brad, I want to start with you. What piece of advice do you want everybody listening to really take away from today and just overall moving forward?
It's a great question, Kyle. Just a couple of universal tips that whether it be this industry or another, that will set you ahead of 90% of the competition. It's gonna be simple, but not easy to do for sure consistently. If you're someone who's kind and treats other people well, if you show up on time, even early, if you work hard, man, if you do those three things, you're ahead of 90% of the people. People want to work with people they like that are reliable and hardworking. That covers those three bases. Like you can do those things, you can walk into any workplace in any role, and you will have some level of success, and you will be separated in some way. So take those three things. Forget about anything I've said. Do those three things: kind, on time, work hard. You're going to get pretty far in anything that you do. Specifically about what we do. Look, I give you guys a lot of credit for pursuing this career. It's a fun career. I just wanted to be in sports and I was able to play that out on the field and then transition to that after. And I just think that it's probably a theme throughout, but I'll just reiterate again, just be authentic. Ashley wanted to be on the air and then he did it and he realized he didn't want to do it. I thought I wanted to be in finance and I did it and I realized I didn't want to do it. It's amazing what the evolution of your journey can look like, even if it starts in areas where it looks like it's just kind of peanuts and it's like, what am I even doing this for? I feel like I'm not getting anywhere. All of that work will pay off and you're just investing for a long term. Here's the other thing I would say. Coming out of college, you're young, you're probably in your low 20s. I'm old now compared to that. It feels like the weight of the world to do it all and get it all right now, right? It's not going to happen. That shouldn't discourage you because you overestimate what you can do in a year, but you underestimate what you can do in about 10. So if you think long term, that is another advantage you can have over everybody else. Think long term, be kind, be on time, and work hard. Mute it again, Kyle.
Dang, I tried to click
Unbelievable.
it. Go ahead, Ashton. Maybe you saw my voice. Ashton, go ahead and give him a piece of advice.
My advice is listen to everything Brad Nortman says from here on out for history. What I've learned over the last hour is I do not belong in the same room with him, and he is better than me. I already knew that, but no. But what Brad's saying is true, and with Kyle, and I want to echo that also. Thanks so much for being part of this, everyone, and thank you for your questions. This is one of my favorite things to do is to get to talk about this and share my passion with other people. But I think to echo a little bit what we've all been saying over the last hour is like, if you want to do this you got to just do it. Like my number one piece of advice is you just have to do it. Sit in the dorm room, do it. Go shadow a radio station near you. Uh, Throw on Audition or Audacity or your voice recorder on your phone and just start talking into it and mess around with it and listen to different things. This is one of those careers where it's definitely not gonna come to you. Not it might not, it's definitely not going to come to you. You're not gonna fall into anything. You're going to have to work your ass off and you're going to have to really kind of understand what it is. But you also are going to have to look in the mirror. And Brad, how you just put it is so wonderful. And I wish it was advice that I had literally a decade ago when I first started at WTMJ. Was it's not going to happen in a year. I worked really, really hard to get to where I am right now, and I wish I had told my younger self like just take it a day at a time. Like everything's going to be okay. I am a very impatient person. I have learned that about myself in time, and that is something that you struggle with and you kind of battle. And I think all of us in media that want this career in general is we're impatient because we see this thing that we want to build to and we want to be so good at that we're just like, why isn't it happening yet? Just keep working hard. Like I think just keep trying and doing different things and being open to different opportunities. I am very grateful and lucky that I ended up in Milwaukee, which is just an hour drive from where I grew up in Northern Illinois. But if I was in Montana or Michigan or wherever, I can only think of M states apparently right now or Missouri. Like I just think that I would have had to have a hard look at like, okay, do I really want this? Am I going to go move to do this thing? And I think I would have, but again, I got very lucky. So I think if you work hard, at some point, luck's going to find its way to you.
Thanks, Ashton. Strophy?
Listen to Brad Nortman. That's once again the advice. Yeah, no, I think I've hit it with everything I always think, right? Versatility, working hard, doing the damn thing, as Ashley just alluded to. And the three notes Brad just gave you, check those off every single day, and you're going to put yourself in a good spot. So I really have nothing to add. That was a Brad Nortman masterclass.
Thank y'all so much. And then I literally will just say, again, believe in yourself and take advantage of every opportunity. Internships are going to be key because that helps you build your resume, but it also helps build your network. So that is such invaluable experience. And then I'm telling you, take advantage of the opportunities that you have on campus, whether it's the radio station or TV station. That is your chance to truly work on your craft and build a great foundation. So whether it's 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, whatever it is, you'll be getting yourself better and getting yourself prepared as well. But thank you all so much for joining. And really quickly, I want us all to share our email addresses. I don't know we can type it out. Or Kyle, if you have the registration list, is there any way for you to share our email addresses with everybody who signed up today?
I tell you what, first thing tomorrow, I'll go to the registration list and I will share all of your contact information with them.
Fantastic. And I'm telling you, feel free to reach out to any of us. We are happy to help and assist anyway. But thank y'all so much for joining tonight.
Yep, just check your inboxes in the morning. One more thing. Well, first of all, thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Alex, Ashton, Brad. Really appreciate your time. Appreciate all of the attendees for being here. And just one more reminder about the student forum at Lambeau Field, February 22nd. We'd love to see you there. So with that, have a great evening. Have a great rest of your week and a happy holiday season. Take care, everybody.
Take care, everyone.
Hey,
Thanks,
Stroke,
guys.
Ashton, Brad, before you leave, let's
Yes.
smile and let me get a screenshot. I'm
I
gonna
have
get
to smile.
I'm gonna get a little snippet screenshot. Kyle, you can be in this too as well. So everybody say cheese.
Jeez.
All right.
Still holding?
That
Yeah,
took
All
forever.
that.
no, I got it. I got it in the little snippet tool. I'm gonna save it here.
Yeah, send that to me, please, Kyle.
I would definitely do that. Let me just
I
make
like
sure.
the only one that said cheese.
We all said cheese. We were all smiling, showing our pearly whites. So
Early whites.